Hello everyone, and welcome to my talk on data-driven learning for younger learners. This talk I'm going to be talking about using language corpora for boosting schoolgirls' knowledge of passive voice constructions as part of STEM education for mostly monolingual speakers of English at a girls' secondary school here in Australia. So as I said, I'm Peter Crosthwaite. I'm here from the University of Queensland, Australia. And it's my first time to present at EUROCALL. I'm very honored to be given the opportunity to present this for you today. So if you have come into this talk, I'm assuming that many of you know about language corpora and about their use for the purposes of teaching and learning language. Some people call this corpus-based language teaching, or its more common moniker is that of data-driven learning. So the theory behind this is that students consult language corpora, language learners consult language corpora to learn about language in use based on corpora, which are electronically searchable collections, principled collections of electronic text across different kind of speakers, writers, genres, disciplines, registers, and contexts of use. And the idea is that if there is a question that needs to be answered about language, students consult corpus to confirm or reject those intuitions that they might have, to form hypotheses about language in use, to confirm those hypotheses and to reject them. They do this by consulting concordance information, where you would have a search for a query term with some context to the left or right, or to have that displayed in sentence view. But increasingly with the tools that we have available, we've gone beyond concordances and have lots of different other kinds of visual and statistical information to view as well that will help us confirm or deny those hypotheses we have about language. And the approach as a whole has been claimed to stimulate learners' inquiry, promote learner independence and learner autonomy, and to promote a more learner-centered way of thinking in the classroom, where students are answering their own questions about language using the data, rather than resorting to relying on their teacher as the sole source of knowledge. Most of the research has talked about the benefits of DDL at the individual level in terms of constructivist learning, being able to synthesize multiple sources of information, learning from a usage-based perspective, but also increasingly in classroom situations, socio-cultural accounts of data-driven learning are now starting to become noticed in the literature because they are great in-class activities that can lead to discussion and debate about language with a corpus as the central theme. Data-driven learning works, as I already mentioned, through the use of concordances, but increasingly, and the better software that we have available now allows us to consult things like frequency information of, say, n-grams, as you can see here, to directly compare different query terms against each other, or increasingly to look at the data from a visual perspective for students who either cannot read complex concordances or who prefer to see their information presented visually. But in terms of data-driven language research, the vast majority of this, in fact, almost all of it, has been conducted at the university level for a variety of reasons. But the important point I'm trying to make here is that very few studies have been conducted on pre-tertiary learners at the secondary school level, and even fewer at the primary school level. So obviously there is a large gap in the field here that I have been trying to fill, and I know other researchers have also been working with younger learners, as evidenced by the edited volume that I put out in 2019 on this topic. In terms of the reasons why we don't have that many studies at pre-tertiary level, I kind of identify these three as being some of the main ones. There are others, but certainly the corpus data itself is mostly written at advanced native English levels of proficiency, and a lot of them are texts that are written by adults for adults. And there are a lot fewer texts that are suitable for and specific for younger learners. I found this in my own attempts to make activities using adult data, which has then come back as filled with adult language or sexual references and things like that. So that's a bit of an issue. Secondly, a lack of software available for specific use with younger learners. Pretty much all of the software that is out there, with some very few exceptions, mostly in the Japanese context, have had software that is user-friendly enough that a child could navigate it without much difficulty. So some of the most common tools that are used in data-driven language research, like COCA, Ankong, even Sketch Engine, are suitably complex that younger learners are pretty much instantly put off by having to use them. So that's another issue. And thirdly, probably the biggest issue is that if you ask pretty much any teacher before university level, people working in the secondary context, people working at the primary school context, if they've ever heard of a corpus, the vast majority of them will say no. And worse still, if you ask any of them, have you ever tried to use a corpus in your classroom? Pretty much you will get 99% of those teachers, if not a higher number, who will say, I have no idea about how to do that. So a project that I've been working on over the last year or so has been to try to promote corpus literacy in secondary school teachers, not just teachers of language, but teachers of different subjects across the curriculum here in Australia. And the project that I'm going to talk about today is work that I was doing with teachers of a physical science class, two classes of young girls at about age 12 to 13 years old. These are quite advanced students at an exclusive all-girls secondary school, and they are doing a lot of STEM work, and they have to write science reports. But the teachers identified that even though these are mostly monolingual speakers of English, they still struggle with the academic writing and language demands of writing scientific reports as a genre, because it's not a genre or register that they are familiar with. In particular, they tended to struggle with the use of passive voice in their writing. So the teachers asked me if this is something that we could work on using existing corpus software, and the results are what we're going to be looking at today. So what did I do? In terms of the method, as I said, I had two classes of about 20 year 9 to 10 girls taking physical science electives, and they were doing this for two full terms or one semester of instruction. If you've ever heard of my freely available online course that introduces learners into Corpora and DDL, the Improving Writing Through Corpus course, Corpora course, sorry, I added extra specific modules training these younger learners in the use of the Skell, Sketch Engine, and Lingual platforms, but teaching them how to use these platforms specifically to learn about the passive voice. I can show you some of the content in a moment. After they'd taken the modules, before they took the online modules, we gave them 3 different kinds of pre-tests, 2 of which measuring their kind of receptive knowledge of the passive voice construction, and the final one looking at their productive abilities of the passive voice construction. They then received the training, and then they were given post-tests, pretty much the same as the pre-test, but just with the items presented in a different order. But crucially, in the post-test, they were allowed to use Corpora to come to the correct answer if they wished to do so. And they would signal in the test response whether they had used a corpus to get there or not. We then also gave them a post-training survey and conducted focus group interviews. And we've also got written text from them that they have marked or highlighted on where they have used Corpora, although are not currently at a stage to present that analysis yet. So in terms of the online training modules, the girls had to observe and write about 3 different science experiments during the term. The first was about the effect of static electric charge against deflection of water. As you can see here, when you rub a balloon and then hold it near to running water, the water will deflect from its usual path. And they wanted to see the amount of deviation from that. And then the second was using Ohm's law and resistivity to determine a wire substance. And the third was about how the concentration of an unknown substance can be determined through the use of a known substance. The writing that they were doing would look something like this. So here's one from a student of ours about the static electricity experiment. They would present a rationale. They would talk about what they'd seen the teacher doing. They would write about any modifications to the methodology that they saw the teacher doing, write about the safety and ethical considerations, enter the data that they were doing during the in-class experiment, and then interpret and analyze and evaluate that. And a lot of this writing requires the passive voice construction to be used, mostly in terms of the methodology and their interpretation of the process data as well. So again, here is one that you can see from the Ohm's law, the wire substance resistivity test there. So again, a lot of this writing will require the passive voice to be used. So in terms of the online modules, I'll show you here briefly. The girls' activities are sandwiched towards the bottom of my online course. And again, if you need the link to the course, I'll provide that at the end of this PowerPoint. We've got here some of the activities that the students would do. So for example, here is one on the use of the lingual tool, exploring the / which acts as an OR. A marker of OR, or the OR operator. So if here the students will be instructed to type in was charged or electrified, and then they would be able to see which of those verbs would be the more likely candidate in this case. They would then be given a fresh expression to use. They would consult the corpus and then enter the correct answer accordingly. So that was one there from lingual. I believe there's one here from word sketch in Skell as well. So here the word measure, which was one of the more frequent verbs that they were using in their write-ups. Here, the students can see the verb measure, the word sketch of the verb measure. They would look at the results and then they would complete some multiple choice answers based on what they managed to see. So let's have a quick look at the results now. In terms of the grammaticality judgment task, there was no significant difference between the pre-test and post-test results. You have to remember, though, that the vast majority of the girls in the class are monolingual speakers of English. And as a result, the pre-test scores were actually quite high to begin with. So we wouldn't necessarily have expected much of a difference between the pre and the post-tests. However, as I mentioned before, when in the post-test, students were allowed to use a corpus and indicate on their answer if they had done so. And the interesting thing we found was that the students, as a collective, used Corpora 168 times at different points during the post-test. And of these attempts, 147 or 87.5% of these attempts finally resulted in a correct answer. So that's really very encouraging. Similarly, also for the second post-test, the error correction test, the students did not achieve significantly higher or lower scores between the pre and post test, but when students were given the opportunity to use a corpus to check their intuition, they were correct at 87.5% of attempts, which is really very encouraging. Oh, I did forget to show you the actual post-test setup, the tests here. So here is the grammaticality judgment test. The students would get a sentence which could be in the passive voice, and they were asked to check whether they were correct, incorrect, or not sure. For the error correction test, they were given an erroneous sentence, and they would have to type in what the correct answer would be. And again, for the post-test, they could indicate whether they used a corpus to do that or not. And then with the picture description task, they had to describe the journey of a package from a young boy to his grandfather. Again, with each of these sentences were supposed to be produced in the passive voice, with the exception of the final one. Moving on to the productive task, the picture sequence description task, and here we did see a significant improvement between the pre-tests and the post-test results. So girls did better on the productive task and the post-test. In addition, when students consulted the corpus to check their intuition, 77.77% of the attempts resulted in a correct answer. So again, really very encouraging. Now, in terms of the questionnaire results, the post-training questionnaires, in terms of their preferred corpus tool, Lingual by Jason Chang was by far the most preferred tool. It's very simple to use, and it allows you to see those direct comparison of potential different corpus query results with the use of wildcards and different kinds of operators. Skell was the third preferred tool, and Sketch Engine was the second preferred tool overall. The reasons for this mainly are because students found the wildcards and the ability to compare results in Lingual as by far the most useful function. However, students also appreciated the disciplinary specificity, or being able to search by discipline within the BAWE corpus that is embedded into the free version of Sketch Engine. So in terms of those three functions, those are the ones that they found most useful. When asked about their perceptions of corpus tools in general, the students were generally positive about their ability to access the tools, their speed, that they were easy to learn, and that they understood what they needed to search for. Although they were relatively mixed on understanding concordance output, the ease of use of the different tools, and understanding how to conduct complex searches. In terms of their perceptions of the online training, overall students were generally positive about the online training that they received, although were less confident about the end of module reflective sections, and many of them did not necessarily enjoy completing the online activities. They claimed that it wasn't fun enough. When you're working with children, this is something that you have to deal with. Now, in terms of the perceptions of Corpora for learning the passive voice, overall students were quite positive about this, which is very encouraging. Now, in terms of the focus group interview data, students discussed three main topics. These were their current online language learning tools, their use of online corpus tools, and online module training. In terms of their perceptions of the online corpus tools that they have used, their preferences are here as follows. They mainly discussed their preferences for the Lingual and Sketch Engine platforms. Regarding Lingual, they discussed how easy and appealing the platform was. And with Sketch Engine, they discussed its usefulness and its versatility. And you can see here some of the different comments that the students made. In terms of what they used the tools for, we separated these into general use and specific use. Their comments in terms of general use mainly focused on using Corpora to find words, and also about learning the different settings of the tools in order to get what it was that they needed to do. Commenting specifically, they mainly focused on the use of Corpora for finding words again within the writing that they were doing, so the science experiment reports, write-ups, and then also they talked about using them in different papers and assessments on other courses. Finally, They mentioned again that they would use Corpora in the future, again, to find words and to find examples. In terms of issues that they had with the online corpus tools, most of these revolved around the user experience. And in terms of suggestions for improving tools in the future and the training, they wish to add content to the training, including making videos and avatars and points to make it more fun. In terms of the tools, they would be interested in having a tool that allowed them to produce citations and references, different filters for different subjects and writing styles, and other suggestions, and also to simplify wherever possible the user experience. So just to summarize, while students' receptive knowledge of the passive voice did not significantly improve, when given the opportunity to use a corpus, students were generally successful. Students' productive ability, however, did significantly improve once we take students' successful corpus queries into account. In the final summary page here, in general, students' perceptions of Corpora and data-driven learning in general were very positive. However, when involved in free production, they tended not to use the corpus to look for passive voice, but tended to use it to look up lexical or phrasal items over grammatical ones, although this is something that I've found in previous research. In general, these younger learners prefer the simplest, fastest tools available. They like to make comparisons of different query results, but like software that does this in one place. They do not particularly find concordances useful over visual or statistical information, but they do find disciplinary specificity particularly important. Many thanks for listening. I hope I've not gone over the time too much. The links to all of the software and the training tools that I've talked about during this session are available to view here. I do invite anyone to come and check out my freely available online course on the trained users in the use of Sketch Engine and Skell and Lingual for improving academic writing. And you can also see all of the activities that I've developed for the secondary school girls now on that website. So thanks very much for listening, and I look forward to fielding your questions during the Q&A sessions. All the best and goodbye for now.